In this video series, we'll delve into the biblical timeline of history. We aim to uncover the significance of important historical dates, such as the creation in 11,013 BC, the flood in 4990 BC, and even the date when God would bring judgment upon the house of God, the churches, as mentioned in 1 Peter 4:17. We'll also explore the date of Judgment Day, which is also alluded to in the same verse. And you might be wondering what the biblical timeline of history is and why it's important to learn. These dates weren't placed in the Bible arbitrarily. They serve a purpose beyond mere knowledge. God always has a reason for concealing truths within the Bible. These essential dates are not explicitly stated in verses, but require meticulous exploration through comparing Scripture with Scripture, the biblical method for revealing truth, mathematical analysis, and ultimately guidance from God's Holy Spirit. So what exactly is the biblical timeline of history? It's a timeline that spans across the Bible, beginning with the first book, Genesis. This timeline then extends into subsequent books and chapters. Why should we invest time in learning about the biblical timeline of history? The answer can be found in Ecclesiastes 8:5. Whoso keepeth the commandment shall feel no evil thing, and a wise man's heart discerneth both time and judgment. To comprehend the current time or season, understanding past biblical events is essential to understand when future events will occur that the Bible is prophesied about.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to another timeline episode. I'm back here with Brian, and it's been a few weeks, but we're just gonna pick up on going over the Kings timeline. This should be the last video for the Kings. Should be able to rename myself. All right, Brian, you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so this is going to be, I can give you the title. It's going to be episode 17, and this is the Kings part 10. So we're going to finish up with the Kings, God willing, today. And then we'll finally get back to the main timeline that we started with. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. So we're going to head to the website, ebiblefellowship.org. Just pull that out. All right. And then I just want to let people know that we made a few changes here. So if you scroll down, you're actually going to see that there's a little bit of information about the timeline on the home page of the website. And you can actually access the timeline this way if you click this. Or alternatively, you can go, you can click the option that we've been going to over here, Biblical Timeline. I just added this on the home page just so, it, creates more traffic, I guess. More people can see it if they don't know about this option. So what you want to do is just click the timeline. And then when you get to this page, this will give you a brief intro about the timeline. And then you can either scroll down or just press enter, and that'll take you here. Okay. I cleaned up a little bit of the top space because it was taking up a lot of clutter. So if you want to see these other options here, you can just click the expand banner, and then you can also shrink it back. It just adds a little more space. Okay. So we're going to pick up where we left off with the Kings. So if you scroll down on the timeline, we're going to go to the Kings tab. And this was also changed here. To get to the Kings tab, you no longer click this button here. You actually click right here. So click here for the Kings timeline. If you click this, this will actually just expand the King's timeline, the reign of the king. So you can actually see, and we'll go over this a little bit, but the reason why we have the second page is because we're going in more detail, trying to line up all these kings. It's something you couldn't see with just laying it out this way. So that's why this is the timeline for the king. So we're going to open that up in a new tab over here. And then we'll kind of just briefly go over some of this that we have here. And if you just want to hide it to get rid of it, you just click it again, and that will clean up the kings there. All right, so if you recall, the last king that we left off with was King Manasseh. So that was after Hezekiah. We finished all of the kings of Israel. We saw that a few episodes ago that their line just died off completely when you get to the last king, which is King Hoshea. He was the 20th king. So that line died off. And then Hezekiah, we went through Hezekiah. He's the king of Judah, the 13th king. And we kind of we did go through these kings down to the rest of the lines of the kings of Judah, but we didn't really fully understand how Mr. Campion had arrived at where to place Manasseh. And me and Brian were thinking that he used the 1290, which we'll get into later. There's a time path from the time when Jacob entered into Egypt all the way to the Babylonian captivity. But just after further research, we were able to, I think, piece it all together. So we'll get into that later. So we left off with Manasseh, so we're just going to go to him. He's the 14th king of the line of the kings of Judah. And we'll figure out how we got to, we'll figure out why we placed him where we did and how long his rule was. So if you don't mind, Brian, can you read this?
Sure. King Manasseh was the 14th king of Judah. Second Kings, Second Kings chapter 20, verse 21. And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and Manasseh his son reigned in his stead. So how long did he reign? Well, in 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 1, we read, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 50 and 5 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hephziah. So when did he reign? We're going to take an excerpt from Mr. Camping's The Perfect Harmony of the Hebrew Kings. So for two reasons, we immediately suspect that during a number of these 55 years, Manasseh was co-regent with his father Hezekiah. The first reason is that he was a child of 12 years when he began to reign. That is true. That
No, it is true.
Sorry, it is true that like other kings, Josiah, who became king at 7 years old, Joash, who became king at 7 years old, and Josiah, who became king at 8 years old, began to reign as children. But in their situations, their fathers, who were reigning as kings, were killed in an untimely fashion. Hezekiah, who was Manasseh's father, reigned for 29 years. His death was not a result of a palace rebellion. So that brings us to the second reason. In Hezekiah's 14th year, he became deathly ill. And we read in 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 1, in those days Hezekiah was sick unto death, and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz, came to him and said unto him, Thus saith Jehovah, set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live.
If you pause right there for a second, I'll just show you on the timeline. So Hezekiah 14th year is, and that would be his 14th accession year.
Accession year.
Yep, that's right here. So this is when he got the news that he was going to die. And this would have been when God extended his life outwards another 15 years. So 14 plus 15 gets you to 29.
Okay. And you skip down to verse 6. That's 2 Kings chapter 20 and verse 6. And I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake. So this event occurred in Hezekiah's 14th year, which would have been 701 BC. Can you show that again?
Yep, right here.
And we know this because he reigned for 29 years. I believe it was 29 accession years, right?
Yeah, 29 accession years.
And so if 15 years were added at the time of this illness, since we knew the year of his death, it seems appropriate that he would prepare his young son Manasseh for the kingship by making him co-regent during the closing years of his life. Now, it's important to note that his son was not actually born when he was giving the 15-year extension yet. So how many years was Manasseh co-regent with his father Hezekiah? We have no immediate information in the Bible that helps us. However, as we have already noted, near the end of Judah's history, the Bible gives us much information concerning the king of Babylon who destroyed Judah. Additionally, the secular record concerning the king of Babylon is sufficiently detailed and accurate so that we can harmonize this information with the biblical record and know that we have truth. Based on the preceding information, which we will develop later in our study, we will know that Manasseh began to reign in the 18th year of his father Hezekiah, which was the year 967 BC. His 12th year, 865, was his full year reigning alone. The year of his death was his 55th year, therefore 642 BC. So again, that was a quote from Perfect Harmony.
Yeah.
So again, if we look down, we see his 12th year.
Yep.
His 12th nine-accession year would have been the year that his father died and the year that he became sole ruler. Or if you look at his 12th accession year, that would have been his first accession year as sole ruler. So if you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 33 and verse 1, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 50 and 5 years in Jerusalem. And remember, we learned earlier in the timeline that just like when God said, and beget, this would be like in the chronologies of Genesis 5 and 11, it could mean an immediate son, or it could mean a grandson or a great grandson. Well, likewise, when God said began to reign, it could mean that's when he began to reign as co-regent, or it could mean that's when he began to reign by himself as sole ruler. So understanding which one it is makes all the difference as to where to place the king on the timeline.
I just wanted to show an example of this that we went over before with Uzziah, just to refresh people's minds. So Uzziah, when we read about Uzziah, it says that it was in the 27th year of Jeroboam. Well, when we go to Jeroboam's 27th year, which would be his non-accession, it's in orange, which is 766 BC. If you scroll over, 766 is not when he begins to reign, because he began to reign up here. So what God means is when he began to reign, but as a sole ruler. So in this case, it's not referring to co-regency when it says he began to reign. It's referring to a sole rulership. Whereas in the case of Manasseh, it would be when he actually began to reign. His first full year reigning as a co-regency, essentially.
So Mr. Camping placed Manasseh beginning to reign as sole ruler when he was 12 years old, which is the year after after Hezekiah, his father, died. This would make him begin to rule by himself at just 12 years old, which means he was co-reigning with his father Hezekiah since birth, which makes sense because Hezekiah knew he had only 12 years left. And we read in 2 Kings 21:16, moreover, Manasseh shed innocent blood very much till he had filled Jerusalem from one end to another, beside his sin wherewith he made Judah to sin, in doing that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh and all that he did, and his sin that he sinned, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Manasseh slept with his fathers and was buried in the garden of his own house, in the garden of Uzzah, and Amon, his son, reigned in his stead.
So just to mention, it was he reigned for 55 years, as it says up here. So if we know to place him here, because of the verse of when he began to reign by himself at age 12, then if you go 55 years total, that lands you in the year 642 BC. and that leads us right to Ammon. So, at this point in time, we're not able to compare the kings with side by side like we did before. So to finish off these last kings, this is how we do it. So with Ammon, we go ahead and read here. He's the 15th king of Judah. If you don't mind reading that too.
Sure. King Amon was the 15th king of Judah in is that First Kings or Second Kings?
I don't know. I think it's First Kings. Let me just verify it real fast. 21:18. Got to be Second Kings. Yeah.
Okay. So
So
Second Kings 21 verses 18 and 19. And Manasseh slept with his
oh, sorry about that.
And Manasseh slept with his fathers and was buried in the garden of his own house, in the garden of Uzzah, and Amon his son reigned in his stead. Amon was 22 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 2 years. This would be 2 accession years. And he reigned 2 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Meshullemeth, the daughter of Haruz of Jotbah. And so I guess another excerpt from Perfect Harmony. Amon reigned for 2 years. Therefore, he began his reign in the year 642 BC. His first official year was 641 BC, and he was killed in the second year of his reign in 640 BC. And if you look here, you can see he started to reign the year that his father died, and then he reigned for 2 accession years, 3 non-accession years. Okay. So 2 Kings 21, 23, and 24. And the servants of Amon conspired against him and slew the king in his own house. And the people of the land slew all them that had conspired against the king Amon. And the people of the land made Josiah, his son, king in his stead.
I just wanted to point out, if you see these quotation marks, it's because they're the beginning and the end. They're quotes from Mr. Camping's Perfect Harmony book. That wasn't something that we wrote.
Yeah. So we should probably put the page numbers in that.
Yeah, eventually we can do that. It's if somebody wants to know though, going through Manasseh all the way down to Zedekiah, its page is 53 to 64. You'll read about those in Perfect Harmony. So here we're at Josiah. He's the 16th king, and I guess I'll read this. King Josiah was the 16th king of Judah. How long did he reign? 2 Kings 22 verse 1. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jedidiah, the daughter of Adiah of Boskath. So if Ammon died in 640, that means this would have been the year that Josiah takes over. So that's why we place him in 640. When did he reign? Excerpt taken from Harold Camping's book again. Since Josiah reigned for 31 years by the accession year reckoning, which was the way all of the reigns of the kings of Judah have been figured, his 31st year was 609 BC. His death is recorded in 2 Kings 23, 29, and 30. In the days of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. And King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo, which he had seen him, and his servants carried him in a chariot, dead from Megiddo, and brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in his father's stead. Now, if you scroll down, you'll see that we have him reigning for 31 accession years, which takes us to 609 BC. So we place Josiah's first year of reigning at 640 BC. The same year Ammon, his father, died. Since he reigned for 31 years, that takes us to 609 BC, that year that he died. So we just said that, but just rereading what we wrote. And then I think Brian did this breakdown. I'm not sure if it's from Mr. Camping's book.
No, it's not.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to just read that last part there.
Well, it just breaks down to significant digits. So Josiah died in the year 10,404 EA, which is 2 times 3 times 17 times 2 times 3 times 17. And that kind of reminds me of one of the proofs that Mr. Campy talked about before May 21, the number of days inclusively from the cross to May 21, 2011 was 522,000 or 722,500 days, which is 5 times 10 times 17 times 5 times 10 times 17. Well, in this case, the year that he died was 2 times 3 times 17 times 2 times 3 times 17, which is the perfect square. And if you look at 609 BC, that breaks down to 3 times 7 times 29. And 29 is a number that I've come across a lot. I believe it's a very significant number. But I will, quickly point out that Christ was baptized in AD 29, and I'll just say that I believe that it is a number of very prominent significance, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, one thing we forgot to go over when we went over the flood is that 700 and what was the exact number? I think it was 722 500.
Well, that has nothing to do with the flood. That was the number of days from the cross in AD 33
Oh,
to
from the
May
cross.
21, 2011
That's right. Okay.
was 722,500 inclusive days, which
Yeah,
broke
no,
down to 5 times 10 times 17 times 5 times 10 times 17. That had nothing to do with the flood.
You're right. Yeah. So from the cross, so we'll get into that later once we get down to the cross. I don't know why I thought the flood. Okay. So
Yeah, flood on the brain.
all right. So that leaves us to leads us to the 17th king of Judah, which is Jehoahaz. King well, this should be Jehoahaz. King Jehoahaz was the 17th king of Judah. 2 Kings 23, 29, and 30. In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. And we did read this verse earlier. And King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. And his servants carried him in a chariot, dead from Megiddo, and brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him, and made him king in his father's stead. Now, one thing we forgot to point out with Josiah is that Josiah was the last good king of Judah. He was and he happened to be one of the most faithful kings. That's why he's got the green heart there. And he was responsible for destroying all the idols. He would grind them to powder. And there's a whole chapter that goes through that whole account. And I remember Mr. Campion would say, this was just a convenient way for God to take out Josiah in order to bring about the destruction of Jerusalem, because Josiah was a very faithful king, and it's and here we just see he's killed in battle. And so he posed it that way, that it was a very convenient way to get him out of the picture so God could bring out destruction upon Jerusalem.
And Josiah was 8 when he became king, and he reigned for 31 years. So if you take 8 and you add 31 years, that means he was 39.
Yeah.
And of course that's 3 times 13, which breaks down to very significant numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe from 1994 to 2033 is also 39 years. Yeah. Okay, so this is not Jehoahaz, the 6th king of Judah, or Jehoahaz, the 12th king of Israel. There are 3 different kings with the same name. So that's something to keep in mind. These are not the same kings.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways that God makes it so difficult, is that he will give different kings the same names and the same Strong's number. And in some cases, the kings actually reign at the same time with the same names.
Yeah.
Saw that with Joash / Jehoash and Joram / Jehoram. And
so
also there were 2 king
Joash, I think. 2 Joashes, 2 Jorams, 2 Jeroboams.
Yeah, 2 King Jeroboams. It was Israel 1 and Israel 14.
Yeah. In this case, he goes by King Ahaziah. Jehoahaz, and also Azariah. So that's how we're able to separate this one. He's the 6th king of Judah. Then you have the 12th king of Israel. This Jehoahaz, I can say it.
Jehoaz.
Jehoahaz. He's the 12th king of Israel. And that's how we know that he belongs here. Obviously, if you read the scripture context, you know he comes after Jehu. So so this one, he's one of the last kings. Scroll down. So we know he's the third one. So when did he reign and for how long? So this is another excerpt taken from the Perfect Harmony. Jehoahaz reigned only 3 months. 2 Kings 23:31. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. So you can see here he only reigned for a very brief period of time, for 3 months, which is why we placed he's in the same year that Josiah dies. So he reigned and then he died in the same year. So not even a full year of reigning. And this is just interesting to point out, but I believe Josiah was okay, he's 8 years old. Who was it? Oh, we'll get into that afterwards. So he reigned 3 months, so we read that. Therefore, he reigned during the year 609 BC. He was deposed by Pharaoh Necho, as disclosed in 2 Kings 23:33-34. And Pharaoh Necho put him in bands at Riblah in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in the room of Josiah his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim, and took Jehoahaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. So this is a brother to Josiah had 2 sons. Jehoahaz was one son, and then he replaced him with his other brother. Okay, this takes us to our 18th king, which is Jehoiakim, also known as Eliakim. And Brian, if you don't mind reading this one.
Sure. King Jehoiakim was the 18th king of Judah in, I think that's supposed to be 2 Kings. 2 Kings 23 verses 34-36.
I believe so. Yep.
And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in the room of Josiah his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim, and took Jehoahaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zebudah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah.
All right, so he reigned 11 accession years. That's why we have him at 11 right here. So if the same year that Josiah dies, in the same year that Jehoahaz dies, which is 609, his brother Jehoiakim takes over in 609. So that's why we can place him here. If you're wondering why we placed him here. And he only reigns for 11 years. So that means the end of his reign would have been 598. I'll let you read that part.
And one other thing that we can note is I don't know the exact date that Josiah was killed. However, we know that his son reigned for 3 months after his death, and the year did not change because his second son became ruler that same year. So we know that Josiah could not have died in the last 3 months of that year.
Yeah.
So again, we don't know when he died, but he couldn't have died in the last 3 months. But anyway, another excerpt taken from Perfect Harmony. Since Jehoiakim began to reign in 609 BC, his 11th year was 598 BC. And in Jeremiah 25:1, we discover the next time reference to Jehoiakim. There we read, again, Jeremiah 25 verse 1, the word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, that was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. From this reference, we know what year King Nebuchadnezzar began to reign, in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, which was 605 BC, which means that the first year of the Babylonian king was also 605 BC. The next
Yeah.
citation,
I can just show them that real fast. So Jehoiakim, according to the verse, in his fourth year, which this would be his fourth accession. You scroll over 605. That's why we have Nebuchadnezzar here. This is when he begins to reign. So you notice he's co-reigning, essentially, not co-reigning, but he's reigning alongside these two kings. Okay, you good.
so the next citation that we will examine is 2 Chronicles 36, verse 6, where God informs us that Jehoiakim was deposited by the king of Babylon.
Opposed.
Against him came up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and bound him in fetters to carry him to Babylon. We place Jehoiakim at the beginning. We place Jehoiakim beginning to reign at 609 BC due to his brother Jehoahaz dying in 609 BC after reigning only a few months, both sons of Josiah.
And then not sure if we should go through Nebuchadnezzar. I guess we'll go through. So the next king would be the 19th king. This is Jehoiachin, also known as Jeconiah, also known as Coniah. He's the 19th king. So King did you want to
No,
read it?
go ahead.
King Jehoiachin was the 19th king of Judah. So how long did he reign? Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign. I believe that's the same age of Josiah. And he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah. Amazing, just at 8 years old, he's doing evil. Never thought about that. How long did he reign? So again, this is a quote from Mr. Campion's Perfect Harmony book. First, let's address an apparent contradiction. In 2 Kings 24:6, we learn that Jehoiachin, also called Jeconiah and Coniah in the Bible, the son of Jehoiakim, became the next king. And in 2 Kings 24:8, Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. And his mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. But 2 Chronicles 36:9 reports that he was 8 years of age when he began to reign. And that is 36 verse 9. Jehoiachin was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah. This is a quote from Mr. Campion's book, so there's a few typos. He meant to put sight, and he corrected it there. This apparent contradiction is resolved when we recognize that Jehoiakim made his 8-year-old son co-regent with himself almost immediately after Jehoiakim ascended the throne. So if I understand this correctly, Jehoiakim, which is right here, he made his 8-year-old son co-regent with himself, which would have been Jehoiachin, right? Co-regent this up almost immediately after Jehoiakim ascended the throne in 609 BC. So that's why you see them co-reigning next to each other. In the next year, 608 BC, his 8-year-old son Jehoiachin was made co-regent with him. Thus, 10 years later, so if we go to 608, which is right here, 608, 10 years later, when Jehoiachin was 18 years old, so we go 10 years later, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 years later when Jehoiachin was 18 years old. He was already reigning with his father Jehoiakim, was taken to Babylon. Jehoiachin then reigned for 3 months and 10 days before he was taken to Babylon. Additional information concerning the deposing of Jehoiachin is given in 2 Kings 24, verse 12. When we read that, it was the 8th year of King Nebuchadnezzar. 2 Kings 24:12, and Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother and his servants and his I think he meant to put princes and his prices and his officers, and the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. So this would be the non-accession year because it's in orange. The 8th year of King Nebuchadnezzar was therefore 598 BC. So if we scroll over, in his 8th non-accession year is 598. If you scroll over to the left, that would be the last year. That would be the 11th year of Jehoiakim, which is also the 10th year of Jehoiachin. That's what we were looking at. So this is the last year that Jehoiachin reigned, was 598, which is the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. So he's being carried into, went out to the king of Babylon. Okay.
Just
And
one thing I just want to cover real quick. There's one verse that says that Jehoiachin reigned 10 days and 3 months, or 3 months and 10 days, and then there's another verse that says that he reigned 3 months. We saw a similar situation. All right, so there it says 3 months and 10 days.
I think
I
the
don't-
other 3 months right here.
Yeah, so there it says 3 months, and the other says 3 months and 10 days. Now, if you recall, we did see a similar situation with David. There was one verse.
Actually, the one that just says 3 months is
Yeah.
when it mentioned that he's 18 years old. Whereas the one that just says 8 years old, it mentions 3 months and 10 days. You actually have two you have two things you have to work out there.
Yeah, well, and the one he was 8 when he became co-regent with his father. He was 18 when he became sole ruler, and he reigned for either 3 months and 10 days as sole ruler, or he reigned for 3 months as sole ruler. Now we see a similar situation, if you recall, with David, where there's one verse that said that he reigned 7 years in Hebron, and there's another verse that says that he reigned 7 years and 6 months in Hebron. And so I believe that the way we can understand this is that David reigned 6 non-accession months in Hebron, and then he reigned 7 accession years in Hebron. And so too, in the case of Jehoiachin, after his father was deposed, he reigned as sole ruler for 10 months, for 10 days in his first non-accession month, and then he reigned for 3 accession months. And so that's how we can understand the discrepancy between 3 days and 3 days and 10 months. So he reigned 10 days in his first non-accession month, and then he reigned for 3 months thereafter.
Yeah. So you'll see here it says David reigned over Israel for 40 years. 7 years reigned he in Hebron. So here it mentions the 7 years. And if you scroll down here, it mentions 7 years and 6 months. So what Brian is saying is that if these 6 months would be included in his non-accession year, right? And then the 7 years would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 full years and then 6 months. However, the reason why it can be also true that it's just 7 years is if you don't account this first year, because it wasn't his first full year. So it's 7 full years, but then you add the 6 months if you want to include the non-accession, which is actually the purpose of the non-accession, is that it's not a complete year. It's, in this case, it's half a year. 6 months is half a year. So if he reigned for the full year, then he would have reigned 8 full years, right? And that would have been a whole accession year, but that's the point of the non-accession. So a similar idea would apply to Jehoiachin.
Where
Okay.
whatever month his father was deposed, he reigned 10 days in that month as sole ruler, and then he reigned 3 accession months as sole ruler. Now, one other thing I want to point out that's interesting, if you could just scroll up a little bit.
Oh. Yeah.
When Josiah dies, you'll see that his son reigns for 3 months. And so he reigned the same year that Josiah died, and then his second son reigned during that same year. Okay, which means that that 3 months was still the same year, occurred in the same year that Josiah died, and his second son became king during that same year. However, if you scroll down, you'll notice that Jehoiachin, his uncle Zedekiah or Mattaniah, becomes ruler the following year. And so I think what happened is during those 3 months, it crossed over the new year, which is why his uncle began to reign the following year.
Yeah. I see what you mean, yeah. Okay, so we're going to go over to Nebuchadnezzar, and then we'll get down to Zedekiah, and that will we'll wrap up the kings. So King Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon. Jeremiah 25:1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all of the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim. So we learned that the 4th year of Jehoiakim, that's his accession year, 605 BC, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, that was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And so that's how we know to place Nebuchadnezzar here in 605 BC. And Nebuchadnezzar becomes king. From this reference, we know what year King Nebuchadnezzar began to reign. The 4th year of Jehoiakim was 605 BC, which means the 1st year of the Babylonian king was also 605 BC. And this is a snippet from Mr. Camping's book. And this is something I thought I'd share. If you look at Perfect Harmony, you'll see this this image Mr. Camping had in his book. Oops, didn't mean to do that, but let me just go back for a second. All right, so you see that Mr. Camping actually laid out the king's timeline in a very similar fashion. We copied it over. So he places Nebuchadnezzar in Jehoiachin's 4th year. And let's see. And he just lays it out in a very similar fashion. So I just thought I would show this. Okay, now 605 BC 1. Just refresh the page. Okay. And I don't know for sure why and Brian doesn't know, I don't think either. But Mr. Campion has Nebuchadnezzar reigning for 23 accession years. Now, I think he's that's something we can figure out later, but for now we just have him laid out that way. And I don't know if that's when he died and his son Belteshazzar takes over, or if that's just how long the information that the Bible gives us of how long he's reigned thus far. All right, and then finally we'll go through Zedekiah, also known as Mathaniah. He's the 20th king of Judah. And Brian, if you don't mind reading that.
Sure. King Zedekiah / Mattaniah was the 20th king of Judah and the last king of the line of kings. In 2 Kings chapter 24, we read in verse 15 to 18, and he carried away, and this would be a reference to Nebuchadnezzar, and he carried away Jehoiachin to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land, those carried he into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon. And all the men of might, even 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths 1,000, all that were strong and apt for war, even them the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon. And the king of Babylon made Mathaniah his father's brother's king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah. And how long did he reign? In verse 18, Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years. Okay, so when did he reign? Again, this is an excerpt from Campion's book. Following the deposing of Jehoiachin, we read in 2 Kings 24, verses 17 and 18, that the king of Babylon made the brother of the king of Judah in place of Jehoiachin. 2 Kings 24, 17 to 18. And the king of Babylon made Mattaniah his father's brother king in his stead, and changed his name to Zedekiah. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. Zedekiah's first full year, according to the
So this is the end of the nation of Judah.
yeah.
Just wanted to read that. We're good.
Zedekiah's first full year, according to the accession system, was 597 BC, and his 11th year by the same system was 587 BC. Since he was the last king of Judah, the year 587 ended the period of the kings of Judah. And in Jeremiah 32:1, we read, Jeremiah 32:1 gives another citation that describes the time relationship between the reigns of Zedekiah and Nebuchadnezzar. In Jeremiah 32:1, we read, the word that came to Jeremiah from Jehovah in the 10th year, and that would be the 10th accession year, in the 10th year of Zedekiah, king of Judah, which was the 18th year, and this would be the 18th non-accession year of Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, and this is 588. So if you look here on the timeline, 10th year of Zedekiah is right here, which is 588. You scroll over, and the 18th year is 588. So this is 18th non-accession.
The 10th year of Zedekiah by the accession year system was 588 BC, as was the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar by the non-accession system.
Yeah.
The end of
showed you.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying which is what we just read is what we just showed you. So
yeah. The end of Jerusalem. The end of Jerusalem is described in Jeremiah 52, verses 12 to 15. The Bible describes the precise day the city was destroyed. Jeremiah chapter 52, verses 12 to 15. Now in the 5th month, in the 10th day of the month, which was the 19th year, and this would be the 19th non-accession year, of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, which served the king of Babylon, into Jerusalem, and burned the house of Jehovah, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and all the houses of the great men, burned he with fire. And all the army of the Chaldeans that were there with the captain of the guard break down all the walls of Jerusalem round about. And then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive certain of the poor people and the residue of the people that remained in the city, and all those that fell away, that fell to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the multitude. In this citation, God again emphasizes that this occurred in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar in the non-accession year system. And go ahead.
I'm just pointing to right here. So that's 587, which lines up with Zedekiah's 587. That's his 11th year.
So in this citation, God again emphasizes that this occurred in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. This is in the non-accession system. And in 2 Kings 24:12, we read that it was in the eighth year of King Nebuchadnezzar that Jehoiachin was taken to Babylon. In Jeremiah 52:28, the Bible records that it was in the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar that 3,320 captives were taken.
So I can just show the date with Jehoiachin. So he's just pointing out the different time references we have. So we read that in the 8th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, that was Jehoiachin was taken to Babylon. So Jehoiachin is right here. And in his 8th year, I mean, he's taken to Babylon in 598, but 598 corresponds to Nebuchadnezzar's eighth non-accession year, which is 598. And then the Bible records that it was the 7th year of Nebuchadnezzar that 3,320 captives were taken. Which I'm not sure if it's a 7th accession or non-accession. I think actually it's the 598. So the 7th accession year. So anyways. No, I'm sorry. It's both 7 and 8.
Yeah.
So it's an apparent contradiction. We read that it was the 8th year of King Nebuchadnezzar that Jehoiachin was taken to Babylon. And the Bible records that it was the 7th year So he's saying, so you can go ahead and finish reading that.
So there is no discrepancy because the 8th year of the king is the same as the 7th year, counting from the year 605 BC, when King Nebuchadnezzar ascended the throne. We come to 598 as his 8th year. So it would have been his 7th accession and his 8th non-accession year. However, reckoning by the accession year system, the year 598 was his 7th year. Remember that in the accession year system, the year number 1 for a king was the first full year he reigned, and therefore the year number 1 was the year immediately following the year he ascended to the throne. Likewise, in Jeremiah 52:29, we read that the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, he carried away captive 832 persons. Remember that in Jeremiah 52:12-15, we read that it was in the 19th year that the captain of the guard carried away certain of the poor of the city. Again, there is no contradiction. The 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar was the same year, 587 BC, as the 19th year. And, again, his 18th accession, 19th non-accession. Can you scroll down?
Mhm.
The 18th year, according to the accession year system, started counting from his first full year as king in 604 BC. The 19th year, according to the non-accession system, started counting from the previous year, 605 BC, when he actually became king. By God's mercy, we have been enabled to reconstruct the calendar of history covering the entire period of the kings of Israel and Judah. This ends the lines of the king of Judah.
I think this is a typo, but Mr. Kempe probably meant to put Abel. So,
Or it could have been Abel's.
yeah. So, yeah, that's it for the lines of the kings of Judah. So we finally finished the kings. It took us a while, but we made it. So, if you guys want to get back to the main timeline, we've added a button here. It says return to main timeline. And we only have a few minutes left here, so just wanted to show you a few things, like what we plan on going over next, and then we'll wrap it up. So we're down here at the kings. We just went through the whole timeline in detail. So now if we click on this 460-year reign of the 43 kings, you can kind of just see each date without having to click on the more detailed timeline, right? So and you can just see their dates. So 931 BC was when Jeroboam took over, because that's when Solomon died. You can see when Solomon finishes the temple, when Asa rules, all these different kings. And finally, when you get to the bottom, BC 597 is when Zedekiah begins to rule, and then 10 years later is when he falls in 587, and that's where we just left off. So from here, we're going to get into the 70-year tribulation that the Bible speaks of, that they're in captive to Israel was captive to Babylon. And then after that, we'll go over a few things like the completion of the Old Testament, if we can, and also that leads us to our next point in time, which will be the era of Christ, when Christ is born. So we'll get into that. So I just wanted to show you this change. So if you want to hide that, you just click that. And also for the 480-year period from the Exodus to when Solomon lays the foundation of the temple, you can also just click this. This will hide it, and this will actually show you the breakdown with the 360-year period. There's a few glitches I cleaned up here. It wasn't working as well as it could be. So it's not gone. You just have to click these things for breakdowns here, just like that. And then just oh, that heard some background noise. And then also what we want to get into is a particular time path that's mentioned in Daniel, and we'll go over that actually next timeline session, God willing. This will involve going from when Jacob entered into Egypt, which would have been in 9136 or 1877 BC, And that's that 430-year timeline when they're in Egypt. But we're going to go through the 1290 to see where that takes us on this time path. And also just wanted to point out that we added different time paths on the timeline. So if you want to see certain time paths, you'll see these little arrows here that move. So in the case of Noah, there's a time path we were looking at that we discovered. So if you click that, that basically extends his life out. We got 950 and then another 950. Interesting enough, that takes us to the year 2011. So anytime we find an interesting time path, we'll just add it to the timeline. And you know, it's only just interesting to note. I think Chris talked about Abraham's time path of his lifespan of 175. So we added that here, and that takes you to the 13,046 year of Earth's history. There's an Ishmael time path that takes you to 2029. So you can see how these time paths work as you take a year and then you extend it out towards the end of time, and it ends up looking something like that. So, but we'll get into that later. I just wanted you to get familiar with time paths because we're going to be going over a time path next session involving the 1290. So, if anyone has any quick questions, we probably have time for a quick question regarding what we went over. If not, then we're just going to wrap it up. And it doesn't look like it. So if Guy's there, then Guy, if you don't mind starting the Bible reading, and we'll end the stream.